Welcome to a new episode of Delphine Circle, where we uncover the mind, body, and spirit of success. Subscribe now for free to receive updates on the latest interviews. Then, sit back, relax, and tune in. So I get the beautiful benefit of getting to introduce our guest speaker tonight, Dr. Patrick Porter. I met Patrick through the biohacking group and through Salme, and I immediately fell in love with him, and I've been a groupie ever since. So Dr. Porter was so kind to come, but let me just introduce a little bit about who he is so that everybody has an understanding. He is award-winning author, educator, consultant, entrepreneur, speaker, and the inventor of BrainTap. He's been on the cutting edge of brainwave entrainment technology for 32 years. 20 years of that operating the largest self-help business, one of the largest in the world, having sold over 3 million products. He's become the most highly sought-after speaker within the field of personal growth, but also some of the top medical conferences as well. And he's consulting corporations and sports organizations on peak performance and achieving that peak performance. So he's got so many incredible stories that I just am so excited to introduce him. And just so you know, BrainTap, which we'll talk a little bit about, won CES Product of the Year in 2019. So, and you know how competitive the Consumer Electronics Show is. So we'll talk a little bit about BrainTap, and if you haven't had an opportunity, how many people in here have tried BrainTap before? Oh, a lot of newcomers. Very exciting. Without further ado, can I please welcome Dr. Patrick Porter.
Thank you. I really come out for the weather.
Although it was raining when you arrived.
Yeah, it was raining when we arrived. Beautiful.
I want to definitely talk a little bit more. I did interview Dr. Porter on my podcast, Delphine Circle, for anybody that hasn't had an opportunity to see it. I've also interviewed Tanya, and I highly recommend those podcasts. But today I wanted to open it up a little bit more to allow people to have questions. So the first couple of minutes, we're just going to walk through kind of what Dr. Porter is best known for and what his experience level is, and then we're going to open it up to your questions. And let me tell you guys right now, there's pretty much nothing he can't speak on, so go as broad as you want. He loves that kind of stuff.
Except for politics, I'd stay away from that.
No politics. No. So share with the audience, what is brainwave entrainment?
Well, our brain has something called mirror neurons, and they're always evaluating your environment. So whether you're using BrainTap or any other thing, you're always in training to your environment. And just to give you an example, they now know that you've heard this story of DNA, that they mapped it in 2003, 1% of the genes. Well, they said the other 99% was junk. Well, it's not junk. In 2018, they finally have a device that now they can see what is that junk DNA doing. Every 40 seconds, it's changing every DNA pair in your body. And that's based on what's happening in your environment, what you ate, the people you're hanging out with. Are you hanging out with gainers or drainers? You know, the old saying. And so all these things go into how your body shows up. So what they do know, that's the science is actually called frequency following response. So what entrainment means, if you have somebody, and I'll use the example of somebody with attention deficit, something like that, now they're quick to give them Adderall or something. But the reality is, what we find is that their brain is out of balance. In not only right or left hemisphere, like a lot of people think about, but in the balance of brain waves. All the brain waves are needed. There's not like a villain brainwave, like somebody, but it depends on, it's kind of like state dependence, like driving your car. Every car might not have a fifth gear, but if you have it, it's really nice when you're going down the highway, but not when you're going out of the driveway. The car will stall. So the brain has to be able to shift gears along the way. So when you think of brainwave entrainment, we can use sound. And to use an example that you might identify, if you're in an elevator and you start to hear music and you can't really figure it out, but then you're in there long enough that you start going, hey, that's something from my childhood. And, they changed it. But your brain started adding in the words and everything. That's because everything the brain does is it harmonizes or synchronizes other pieces of information. It organizes them, coalesces them, and we call that resonance. So what happens in the brain is when we're around different people, different events, different experiences, we start to resonate. Think of brainwave entrainment. We can stimulate the brain. So I'm going to give them a few examples of how that works. So your eyes, when you're looking at somebody, you go, wow, you got beautiful eyes. What you're really saying is you got a beautiful brain, because that's brain matter. But the eyes are designed to not only absorb light, that's why you have to wear sunglasses, if you're out in the sun, because you're absorbing too much light. But your eyes, they actually now know you're projecting light. If you ever had the experience where you're sitting on the couch and somebody's looking at you and you go, what do you do? You feel them, because now they know you're projecting light. In fact, you're projecting light over your whole body. Maybe we'll get into that in a little bit. I'll tell you about that. If we were on Delphine's spaceship, which I know she flew here today, and we were heading toward Earth. When we see the Earth come up on our instruments, we'd say that Earth is resonating between 0.5 and 100 hertz frequencies. So depending on where we're at on the planet, we would sync to that frequency. We do that because we have little cilia on our brain. They're little hair-like follicles, and they're always observed, like an alien you might see, but they're so small we don't see them. But the brain is always picking up these frequencies, and then it matches it. So we can do this with light, like I was saying. We can also do it with sound. So when we do it with both, we can basically take you out of your ordinary everyday state and put you into an altered state, which is what we want to do with BrainTap.
Let's give them some good news.
Okay.
He invented BrainTap.
Yeah.
So I want to say how much I love this and how I use this. I use it every day. I use it probably morning and night. And it does 3 things. It has guided meditation, so you operate it from an app on your smartphone. You put it on. Laser light comes through the visor. Laser light comes through the headpiece, the earpiece. And so you basically get the guided meditation, the laser light stimulation, and also binaural beats. So it gives you 3 different modalities, and it does incredible things to your brain in terms of relaxation. Tell them exactly. You can tell them now what it does to your brain. Good.
Okay. So when she said laser light, she really meant LED light. LED. It's low level light. What we did for the ears, when you see those 9 LEDs, it's because our doctors, we have 3,000 clinics using this, and actually, Dr. Handy's here. The Handys, they use it in their clinic. And in the process, what we noticed was they were using lasers on the meridians in the ears. If you've ever done acupuncture, there's meridians throughout the whole body. Think of them as energy highways. And they were using a laser. Well, a laser takes a person, right? And it takes about 30 seconds to 2 minutes, depending upon the power of the laser. So I started thinking, what if we just used something they call photobiomodulation, which means that the body absorbs that energy. Every cell of your body, by the way, has little batteries in it. They're called chromophores. These chromophores fill with energy, and if they're full of energy, you're healthy. The mitochondria is healthy. You can do your things. If you don't, that's why the most underprescribed nutrient on earth is light. Getting outside, Dr. Sunshine and all that. But now we have synthetic light that we can use, like infrared saunas and red and infrared light. So what we're doing here is we're using photobiomodulation to open up the meridians. The main reason for that, and actually Joquita's one of the reasons we have ear lights, because we started working with her group with autism. And we wanted to have, when we first started working, we were using the Zen frames, if you remember the glasses. And I thought, how can we calm the nervous system down with people that don't know, you don't know when you're talking to them if they understand. But our nervous system responds, remember that frequency following response. So we put Dr. Nogier would do it with music. Your body has 7 tones, if you will. If those 7 tones are in harmony, you're healthy. If they're not, then they know. I'm not a professional in this, but I've done enough research that I wanted to use it in our equipment, was that we can feed that frequency into the body, and the body matches it. So in the BrainTap, when Delphine puts that on, every 2 minutes it changes to another frequency. That doesn't change on any program. That's the same. It just keeps changing because that change is because the nervous system needs change. Most people don't like stress, but if you don't have stress, you're not going to learn, you're not going to grow, you're not going to develop. It's not, the old saying, we don't pray to God to take away our troubles. We pray for the strength and the capacity to handle them. And by the way, 2/3 of the world isn't sleeping, and it's because they don't have energy in their brain. If you're like me, I have children of my own, then I have grandchildren. And when you see when my grandkids are overtired, right? They'll say, oh, they're just overtired. They'll relax and calm down. Well, adults have that same problem, but they don't have the energy in their brain to go to sleep. So we're feeding the brain energy. All of the blood in your body goes through your ears, but in the rest of your body, it takes 45 seconds. In your ears, it takes up to 5 minutes. So how light therapy works, and this is not I know it's not a class on light therapy, but what happens is the hemoglobin in your blood absorbs energy. It then circulates through the body and it finds the cells that are about to die. And when it finds one of these cells, which is they call apoptosis, when it's about to die, if the light energy can get there before it dies, the cell actually sucks the energy in, and the Krebs cycle, or how the brain of the cell kicks on, the instruction set gets reset. You get anti-aging. You become youthful again because it's all about energy. If at the end of the day you have energy to enjoy time with your family and friends and people like that, you're great. But if you're the person that comes home, sits on the couch, and next thing you know, dinner's on the table, and then you go back to the couch, pass out, and then you go to bed and you rinse and repeat the next day, that's not a good way to live because it's energy. So that's the lights here. So we're bringing energy into the brain, and we're calming down the nervous system because the one most important, knows your frequency, actually turns off sympathetic drive. So, some people get locked in that. There are people actually that don't get out of bed until they're significantly stressed. They lay there and they catastrophize and all the bad things happen. They go, okay, now I can do it, because they were so worried, but it's a habit. It's not a reality. We get mostly what we anticipate or expect. So as we visualize it, we begin to realize it, and we set up those situations. So the ears are there. We have some people that just use the ear lights because they're sensitive to the eyes. It's a small percentage, about 2 or 3% of the people. If you're fortunate enough to use the eye lights, which are flashing at different frequencies, and by the way, those who've used it, you've probably noticed that after you've used it for a while, you think the lights don't work anymore. So you open your eyes and go, where's the lights? Oh, they're on. That's because when your brain's balanced, you don't see the lights anymore. And that's why a lot of people go, I want more light. But you don't need a lot of light because the eyes have 300 times more mitochondria than any other part of the body. Now, the brain has the most mitochondria, but the eyes per square centimeter, you've got more, and that's what absorbs this light. So we don't want to overdrive the system, but we need energy in the frontal lobe. When we did our dementia study, for instance, we took every woman in the study off dementia in 6 weeks. They had 39% more neuroplasticity, and all they had to do is do the BrainTap 3 times a day. Now, if you're too far gone, there's going to be a lot more that we need to do, but if it's just dementia scale, Alzheimer's we've had some good luck with, but it's better to start early and prevent than to, I tell people it's better to prepare for the hurricane than wait for the hurricane to come and then try to prepare.
What are some of the other benefits that you see people benefiting from once they use BrainTap?
Well, the biggest thing is sleep, is what people report back. The capacity to handle stressful situations. But then you can go to, what do you want specifically? Like, because we have so many doctors we work with, there's never ending stream of new content that they need. Like, I just finished one. If you'd have seen me just 6 months ago, I was 50 pounds heavier. And I had a doctor's group come up to me and say, I want you to do a series for me on the metabolic reset. And I owned a weight loss clinic. So when I was doing that, I was always thin. But you retire and you go, the heck with it, I don't need to do that anymore. And slowly it creeps up on you. And I said, well, you guys, I'd love to do that for you, but I need a metabolic reset. I didn't feel like I could do a metabolic reset if I needed a metabolic reset. So now that's in there. So we just did one for the 100-year lifestyle because there's a lot of people that want to live to be 100 plus. We should be living over 100. I mean, our biological, just at the result, the convention I was just at in Austin yesterday, there was somebody talking about all the illnesses we have are because we're outliving our natural biology. I kind of went, I don't think so. He thinks, we all, after 30, we start figuring out we're not immortal, but that doesn't mean these bodies aren't immortal unless we take care of them, he said that, that's why we lose stem cells, all the things that keep us youthful. But we know the biggest problem is stress. Have you ever seen the president before they go into office? I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, they don't look good when they leave. I wouldn't want to be that president. So when you think about every problem you have, usually there's a problem with stress around it. Whether it's learning, we do a lot with learning. My first book was called Awaken the Genius because was held back in second grade, and my dad helped me. My dad was a Silva method instructor, which is he was one of the first in the country. So I grew up using GSR machines to meditate, and we were the weird family. You know, people would actually come to our house to do aura readings because my dad taught us how to read auras and how to be medical intuitives, and everybody can do it, by the way. In the seminars, everybody did it at least the first day. And then once they did it and they started second guessing themselves, then they wouldn't do it anymore. But everybody has the capacity to do that. And it's so with BrainTap, what happens is you open up your possibilities. And I frequently too, 80% of the thoughts you have every day, unfortunately, are negative. And that's not a negative about you. We were brought up, these bodies in our genetics, you're not just you sitting here. Your mom and dad before you, their mom and dad before them, all the way back 7 generations. That's what's influencing you right now. And that's what they know in science. So when somebody, all of that is playing into it. So we got a lot of stress. I mean, if you've had, like my grandparents were brought up during Depression. So they had a whole different way of, no matter how much money they had, they were saving cans. It's like, what are you going to do with all those cans? And then finally they go on vacation and the family would get rid of their cans, because they thought someday they're going to need those cans again, or something, but this is the way it thinks. So what BrainTap does is you can clear out the past. And the problem is the past isn't going to help you unless you look at it as a positive. You have to reframe it. So
Dr. Porter, you talk a lot about brain fitness, that we're constantly being told physical fitness, what we need to do for our bodies, but rarely do people ever talk about what it is that we need to do to keep our brain fit. And apparently there are things that we're supposed to do. So what are the things that are the most important for us to keep our brains healthy?
Well, number one is to breathe. We're going to do that later today. So without breath, you've got some big issues going on. If you think of every negative emotional state, emotion drives behavior, right? So every negative emotional state has one thing in common. People don't breathe. You can't have a negative emotional state with breath, because as soon as you breathe, it leaves. If you've ever had a little kid come running up and they're angry and you go, don't be angry, or just breathe. And they don't want to do it because they know as soon as they breathe, they're going to lose their anger, and so this builds a habit. So I think that's number one. But the other is you've got to plan your day. When Deepak Chopra says 97% of what's going to happen tomorrow you know about today, what are you pretending not to know? People get up and they plan and they prepare and they do all this stuff, but they forget themselves. Other people can't be more invested in your health than you are. You've got to be the one that's invested in your health. You got to be at least your best cheerleader, and then hopefully you got some other support people in your life that are going to do it. And then I think when you look at the blue zone theories, if you haven't read those books, I would recommend them. They're really good. The communities like this, my dad, when we were growing up, he actually had a group that met, a big group in Kalamazoo, Michigan. They called it the ESP Forum. And they brought out a bunch of weird people, that at the time that we got to hear, that did all sorts of things, like people could read your mind and do all sorts of crazy stuff. And they were like-minded people. You get around, you weren't scared to say something crazy and talk to people. That's important for your brain. When you meditate, when we have a neurocheck device, a device that can measure your nervous system. And we've only found 2 people in the world, and this is gurus included when we go to India, that when they meditated on their own, they could beat the BrainTap. And most of them actually got worse when they meditated because they don't know how to meditate. They didn't do the breath work beforehand. They didn't do any. How many people in here do yoga? Okay. The corpse pose is the most important one, right? Any of the rishis would tell you, everything else gets you to that point. That's when you get all your neuroplasticity. That's when you get that's when everything you did to get the body ready. So yoga is a good way for brain fitness because it's really getting a lot of neuroplasticity. How many people here know about Tai Chi or have done Tai Chi before? That's another thing that's really good for neuroplasticity. But you got to stop at the end. Every time the masters would do this, they would take time to relax. When we were American, you do it and you rush out. I checked that box. I did that. You got to have a little bit of time to let it really be absorbed, because that's when your neuroplasticity happens. If you physically work out, you're also doing that. Even though you might not think think of it the same as a spiritual practice, but everything's a spiritual practice. You can't be more than what you are. So you're just, whatever you're doing is that, and so don't think this or that. What you think is anytime you have a stress period that's good for the body, then you want to have a downtime period. You need to have that uptime and downtime. What some people do is they just have all uptime. All uptime is I think I like what Stephen Covey said, you got to stop and sharpen the saw, if you've ever read that book, where, basically they run into these guys cutting down a log, and the guy says, if you stop and sharpen the saw, you could cut that tree down faster. And they said, no, they're just working away, and they just wouldn't stop. But the reality is that that's brain fitness. You've got to stop. And so what we did when I created BrainTap, it was really for me, because of a series of events that happened when I met the people that had the first big machine. I couldn't afford it. It was $10,000. So I found a way for them to come work with me in my office in Scottsdale. And I got more than the $10,000 machine. I got the whole company eventually. So, but at the time I didn't even have enough money to go to the event, so I never let money stand in the way. If you have a vision, you're going to do it. And I think that it's something you got to do every day. The brain likes patterns, but it doesn't like the patterns being the same. If you understand what I'm saying. So even to the point where if you drive home from the office or from work, wherever you're doing, find a different way to drive home. You'd be surprised how that changes your brain just by doing that.
So a question for you. Is resting the brain the same if you need to use something to help you rest? So if you're using a sleeping pill or marijuana, or is that the same rest? Is it equal or not if you don't have it?
Well, sleeping pills then all the studies show you only get 5 minutes more sleep. You might be comatose, but you're not getting sleep. There's a big difference, just because you can't move your body and you're dead to the world and you're living through those nightmares that they give most people. So you're not really getting sleep. So that one time. Now, if you're using cannabinoids, some form of those, we have cannabinoid receptors. Our brain can handle those. You just got to find the dose that works for you. Some people, if you're doing it to escape, but you'd have to measure it. I think most people, they like CBD and things like that for sleep. My wife uses it all the time. I use it sometimes when I'm flying or something like that. But if you're using the type to get you high, it just depends on where you're at and how you're using it. I've never tested that. But, there's a lot of good ways to do that. I think sleep, alcohol is one thing you want to avoid at least 2 hours before sleep because of sugar. The worst thing you can feed your brain is sugar. And even though alcohol gives you a little buzz, the reason it gives you a buzz is because the brain's thinking it's good sugar and it's not, and then it kills all those cells. So you're chasing consciousness.
What should we be feeding the brain, supplement and food-wise?
Well, you want to be, there's a whole list of them that you could do, but you want to have things like the nuts and seeds, good fats. Your brain is fat. That's what it is. And so you want to have that. You want to have like a lot of green vegetables, things like that do it. So you can get it. I like blue and green algae and things like that to get the fat because that's where the fish get it from anyway. So if you're eating salmon, things like that, salmon's good. Any fatty fish you can eat. Water is really important for the brain. We should be drinking half our body's weight in ounces of water. So if you weigh 120, you drink 60 ounces of water a day or more. If you drink a coffee during that day, you got to drink 3 times that amount of coffee and water to get your water balance because coffee robs your body of water. And by the way, that's probably the biggest problem people have in the world right now is they're dehydrated. Even though they're drinking water, they're not hydrated. There's a difference between getting it into the cells and just drinking it. So a lot of people go, I can't drink that much water. I got to go to the bathroom all the time. Well, that's the problem. It's not getting absorbed and assimilated into the body. And usually that's a stress response, that the body has. And I think that, you got to have adequate protein. If you're a vegetarian, which I was for 18 years, you got to make sure you're getting protein. I stopped because my wife couldn't do it. She basically didn't have the iron level that she needed. So usually we would do red steak one time a week or something like that, sometimes a little bit more, but that's enough to keep her going. But you need to have adequate protein. You need to eliminate as much as possible any of the flours, white bread. When my family got involved with this, it was really my mother, because they told my brother Michael, who's my older brother, they said we're going to have to put him on Ritalin or something. And my mother's really against pharmaceuticals, so she took us to an iridologist. I don't know if you ever heard of it. They look at your eyes and they can tell you what's going on. And she said that these kids can't be eating sugar and white flour and dyes. So back in the 70s, we were the weird family that bagged lunched. And, I still remember my track coach, because I was pretty good at sports. And he goes, don't take those supplements out here on the field. People are going to think they're drugs, because nobody was doing that when I was in, it just wasn't happening. And, so you have to, I think that's, you have to do what's right for you, but you're going to have to supplement some way to get what you need in the body. We're not going to get it from the table unless you have your own vegetables and, put all the nutrients into them that you in the soils and things like that.
So I definitely want to touch on energetic medicine. We were just at the conference down in San Diego, and we're hearing so much about how frequencies and consciousness have an effect on our health. Is it a true statement that there's pretty much no condition that a combination of frequency and consciousness can't cure?
Right. Well, I think there's nothing that consciousness can't cure. You aren't even here. You're 99.9 to the 14th power invisible. You're not, we appear to be solid, but we're not. So we are energy and frequency. There's been so many stories of people, if you change your brain or your mindset, whatever you are, they did a study when people died, and they found out we lost 3/4 of a pound. So whatever that is, they still don't know what that is. So there's dead weight and live weight, but you're that, whatever that energy was that left, it's not animating the body anymore. So when you think about how the brain and body works, we gotta work with that. And I think that there's been story after story of people having spontaneous healings. I had a spontaneous healing at one time. So I think there's a blueprint for every one of us. It's kind of like the builder of this house, or when you were redoing this house, you probably have blueprints and plans, and you knew everything. You don't have them handy all the time. They're in a drawer somewhere. Your cells have that in a drawer somewhere. You have those. You have a blueprint for your body, a perfect blueprint at your whatever age you were. That you thought, hey, this is my perfect body. This is the one I want to freeze in time, and I'm going to keep this body forever. Well, that's never going to happen, because we're in a constant state of flux, right? In fact, even so, as you think about your body and you think about what's going on, these are all important things to think about. But if you think illness, if you identify with your illness, you basically crystallize it. And when I was in school, this was a long time ago, we used to make a radio out of a potato. We could go to Radio Shack, which is a store that used to sell a bunch of, you could you'd put the crystal for your local radio station in the potato. You could put headphones in it. You could actually make a radio. That crystal was picking up that frequency. You have them in every cell of your body. You are the crystal. You're broadcasting and receiving that information. So if you change that channel, you change that crystal, take that one out. I don't want that station. I want this station. I don't want the illness station. I want the health station. Now, what happens when you're in the health station? Oh, you start drinking water. You start eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. You start moderately eating. You start exercising. You start thinking right. You're meditating or using your BrainTap. Whatever it is, you start acting as if, then the whole body changes. Your body, nobody in this room is older than 2 years old. Every cell of your body has changed over. You're not the same person. In fact, when you walked in here, you're changing at about 50 million cells per second. So you're not even the same person that started this conversation. So, but people, I call them dragons of the past. They'll want to drag their past on and on and on. And that's where the illness comes from. If you've ever talked to somebody and you go, how are you doing today? So far, so good. I go, oh man, I don't want to be with them later today. Because they're looking around for the other shoe to drop. We were always trained through this group called the Coptics that you go, wonderful, today's wonderful. It kind of gets a little corny, but you can at least say that to yourself. What's going on? I'm doing excellent. I'm doing great, whatever. You got to be your best cheerleader, because what you think about, you bring about, and so as you think about those things, your subconscious, which is your body, by the way, it then feeds back to you what it is you're perceptually seeing and experiencing. And your body will change like that. And
you ready to take some questions from the audience?
Well, I came from the field of consciousness study. I practiced for 25 years as a psychologist in transpersonal psychology, and so much of what you said is related to that. And so I'm, from a research standpoint, in biofeedback and EMDR, et cetera. And what you're doing is like the next generation. How long have you been doing it, and what kind of outcome studies, and what comes next?
Yeah. Well, we have a book. You can
Great
get it on.
questions.
Yeah, if you look me up on Amazon, you'll see like 13 different books. One of them is actually our research book. We have enough research that we published a whole book with them. Right now, as we're sitting here, there's 7 continents doing research with BrainTap. And mostly because the last research they did was so good. So I'll give you a kind of a summary of a couple of them so you understand. We have any golfers in the house? Anybody golf? There's a golf team down in Florida, Seminole College. They contacted us because they heard me talk at a conference. And they said, would you be willing to work with our golf team? And I said, only if you're willing to let us do a research project with them. And what we did, now they're a 3-time national champion, by the way. And if you go to their website, we have a page about BrainTap on their website. They use BrainTap to recruit people into the college because the golf team, not only did we help them, mentally with their golf, which is really important for focus and concentration. These are world-class athletes. In our study, we improved their alpha scores by 90%. So, if you did play golf, it takes 5 minutes, but you have to walk for 5 hours because most of the time you're not doing anything, you're just walking. We did the one that I mentioned earlier, the dementia study, that Saving Your Brain study, that's actually now at Seminole College. They have a big program going on. They don't have enough people yet, but they're bringing them in as they will. But as soon as we get 100 people done, we'll have our final. And they're following along the same track as this Dr. Kelly Miller, who's a chiropractor in Tampa. He's the one who ran the Saving Your Brain study. And of course, if you do more things like, I believe there's 3 waves to wellness. Number 1 is nutrition. You cannot think a bad diet. So you can't really, unless you're Saint Germain and you can take junk food and make it into, high protein, vibrant foods. Number 2, you got to move and breathe. If you don't move and breathe, your body's not going to function. And number 3, you need some kind of brain fitness. So all of our studies have something to do with that. Here in California, we did a study with Julia Arndt, she's a peak performance specialist. And she contacted me. She said, what do you think you could do for me? I'm doing a study with the top producers of Google and Microsoft. And they're having burnout problems. We had this mass exodus that just happened in burnout. So Dr. Sadral, who's my science officer, we put together a study. We had them do 1 session a day at 2:00 in the afternoon because I knew what happened to them at 2:00 in the afternoon. Their work got worse because they went and ate junk food. They went and got coffee, or they went and did something that screwed up their nervous system. And they were tired. But what they didn't realize when we did that study was every one of the top producers we improved their quality of life score by 70% by doing BrainTap. They would have, if they were prone to getting prescription drugs, they all would have been on prescription drugs. They all qualified on the depression scale as being chronically depressed. And these are top producers. They were because they didn't have life balance, right? You can be good at one, you can't just do your work because then something else is going to suffer. You got to somehow get the work-life balance going. And then we improved the final result of that study was they had a 19% improvement in their production over what they did. And what they do, this is crazy, they actually record their keystrokes. Everything they do on the computer, that they evaluate them. So these guys are working away and they're getting evaluated. You think they're watching us. I mean, they're like every keystroke they're doing, and then they have a formula. They have an algorithm. So they know if you're working up to your potential or not. So the thing is, though, like I said, anytime there's periods of stress, you need that period of relaxation. And just that little break. And when we did the break, this will be the last one, and we'll take the next question. But with the Kansas City Sport, which is a professional soccer team, we went in and the PT there was trying to get them to use BrainTap, but these are professional athletes and they're really smart, and so they're not going to use it because after practice, they just want to go. They've done their time, they're going to go out. So I said, have you ever done a heart rate variability study? And that's what we usually call our neurocheck when we're talking to sports teams because they're familiar with HRV. So we did a pre-scan, a post-scan, and then we said, come back in 4 hours. in 4 hours, you should be back to normal if you're in shape, and so you're going to have a lower heart rate variability after practice. 4 hours later should be back to normal. Well, they all did great, but 2 of them came back and they were worse. And we said, what happened? Because if they're worse, they're either out of shape or something. Both of them had 1 beer. Their nervous system didn't regulate for 12 hours. So, even though the alcohol's out of their system, the body's trying to figure out, hey, what do I need to do? What do I need to do? So the next day we had them come back and we said, this time you're going to stay here. We're going to do a 20-minute session after practice. And then we're going to scan you again. What happened was they got better recovery than they did in 4 hours. Actually, they were beating out where they were before they started the practice in 20 minutes of rest. So what they did is they put in it's a room about this size. It has 20 zero gravity chairs in it, and they have these lymphatic drainage boots. And before they leave the facility now, they do the drainage boots and they do BrainTap. And they have a big room. It's in my presentations. I usually show that to doctors so they can see how these professional sports teams do it. But we have a lot of studies.
When did you start? When did you invent it?
I invented it in '86. It was called the MC square because I like Einstein. We built it as the MC square for about 4 years. And then one of the best things that happened to the company happened, but it was also the worst thing that happened to the company. Because the award we won this last year at CES, in 1989, we got the best new gadget of the year. And so we had orders, we had 100,000 piece orders, but we only made 20,000. I didn't own the company at the time. I was just a spokesman and I was one of the researchers. And the way they tried to sell it was they put them on the shelf, like Kmart and all the stores that are out of business now, Circuit City, Fry's Electronics. They bought these orders, but the way that they work, they buy the order and they ship it, they put it on the shelf. If it doesn't sell in 3 months, they send it back, and you pay both shipping both ways and you don't get anything. So the company went out of business. But what I did at that time is I went to the manufacturer because I didn't own that company. I said, don't get rid of these. I'm going to sell them. He goes, you're going to sell 20,000 units. I said, yeah. I started a franchise company and we sold them in 3 years. And we kept buying. Now we've probably made 750,000 of them. But I knew the way that I know it has to happen is if this was a quote presentation, I would have 4 or 5 chairs set up here and you guys would be doing sessions, because explaining this headset to people that haven't experienced it is like explaining the atmosphere to a fish. You really got to get in the water and swim around, and then hey, this is water. You don't know, what's going on until you experience it. And most people don't even know how stressed they are until they feel the unstressed.
Who has another question for Patrick Porter? Right here.
Yes.
Violet.
I had like my brain scanned, so I'm like your ADD artist, and so they said my brain is like right now
Right
two speeds.
2 speeds?
I'm sorry. 2 speeds, slow and fast. So none of the middle gears work, and so I'm very fascinated about what you're talking about and how it might work with a person with ADD.
Oh yeah, well, that's what I was, and that's what the whole book "Awaken the Genius" is about.
I'm going to read that.
I know we don't believe that.
I'm a reader.
It's what it is each one of think of each brainwave like a gear, and I actually do this in a presentation. It's like a gear shift, like I was talking about 5th gear and 1st gear. If you have, and this is what happens with the autism population, they have high beta, they're stimming, and then they're disassociated, they're in high theta, but they don't have alpha. So in your case, you probably have high alpha and theta and don't have enough beta. So we'd have to scan your brain to know, but if you can train your brain, anybody's brain can be trained. And what's really nice is if you can switch gears, that right now I'm creative and I'm doing my art thing, and then you can still balance your checkbook, hopefully. Those are not 2 things that those people do together, but you can learn to do that. And what we want to do is we want to engage the brain. If everyone take your hands like this and put them together and just choose one thumb to be on top. Does everybody have a thumb? How many have your left thumb on top? How many your right thumb? Okay, does anybody know what that means? What does it mean? Very intelligent. Very intelligent. Whatever thumb's on top, the opposite hemisphere is dominant. And so if you, now everybody take your thumb and flip it over. Flip the other thumb on top. What does that feel like? And that's only your thumb. Imagine making a shift like they're asking you to do a change and you haven't rehearsed. Your nervous system needs to rehearse because it doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. So if you imagine yourself doing these new things with the BrainTap, what happens is your nervous system doesn't know the difference. So you're rehearsing, you're imagining, you're creating, and the same neurons are firing, the same wiring is happening. Now you have this experience where your body learns. Because until you get that uncomfortableness, if you've ever played tennis, even the one teaching you says, you got to change the grip a little bit. You go, oh, that feels weird. But if you do it long enough, that new grip is going to feel just as good. And if you try to go back to the old one, it's going to feel weird. So that's what's happening. So BrainTap shortens that period from the time that's why I always say you get what you rehearse in life, not what you intend. So we got to rehearse it over and over again.
Great question. Heidi?
Hi, my name's Heidi. I'm interested in this idea that we only use 1% of our brain, and I'm curious what you think we can find if we utilize, 2% or 9%, and what do you think the upside variability is there? How much of it do you think we can use, and what would happen if we could?
Right. It's not that we're not using 100% of our brain. We are. Everyone's using 100% of their brain. They're not using the capacity. So it's like having, like we have the Watson computer that can do all this wonderful stuff, but we're asking it to be a calculator. That's our brain. It's not that we're not using it. I'll give you an example. One of the reasons we have lights in the eyes. As soon as you meditate and close your eyes, I can show you almost every person shuts off 30% of their brain. But you want your brain to work when you're meditating. That's why the master meditators, and that's why you do the breath work, keep the oxygen in the brain and keep it going. But most people, the brain's going, I don't have that much energy to do this. I get to take a break, so it shuts it all down. So you got to just keep practicing and rehearsing. And I think the upside is, there are people right now, if you look online, sight without eyes. That's one just to show you the example. And I know the guy, Frank Alardi is his name. He's a guy in LA up there, and he does a lot with, Kat Graham, if you know, she's an actress. They are brain tappers too, but they teach people how to see without their eyes. Like blind people see for the first time, because you don't see with your eyes anyway. That's just the easy way to do it. So the brain knows what to do. And, at one time you were one cell. And then one cell became two, and one became, hey, I'm a kidney, I'm an eyeball, I'm an eyebrow, whatever it is. But they started out that the blueprint was there. So they have people, when you look sight without eyes, you'll see people are running around, and they take people with eyes and they teach them to be blind and then see. It's crazy. I think it would be like X-Men. There's so many. I was telling the girls earlier that I worked with a guy named Gil Gilly. He could read minds. When he was born, he could read your mind. I had an aunt that didn't believe me. I said, Cher, come on over. I'm having Gilly talk to you. She ran out of the house. She thought she was bewitched or something. I said, no, he was born. And he used to love to say, he's been examined, tested, and they said he was normal. He said, what's wrong with you guys? So, we don't know what our capacity is. Don't think about, you use all you have, but it's all about capacity. We can do a lot more with it.
Deeper intuition.
I think we could bilocate and all sorts of things. I know we can transcend food. They've done it with prayer. They've done studies on food before and after praying over it. The food has more energy after you pray over it. I was saying earlier, we transmit energy. How many people here know Tom Brady is? He has clothing called TB12. That was designed by my science officer. And the clothing it has ceramics in it. I sleep in it every night. So the ceramics actually reflect back your own infrared light. We're all broadcasting 18 nanometer light. So if you're a healer, what's healing people more than what you say or do is you. You walk in the room and you have this, it extends about 18 feet away from you. So, we're all sitting in each other's energy, and we're all also transacting information at a level that consciously we don't know about, but we're changed because we're all here together. We're all quantum entangled now, so we want.
Take another question. Yeah. Tony?
Thank you. Thank you for everything. Amazing. And it's funny, we go back to 86. I did a study on bionics, similar to a study on a neuron. So I have one first question is, why is it 10 hertz, which is 100 millisecond, the tap frequency? Is that coming from the water on Earth or whatever is it?
Everything is vibrating, right, and teeming with energy. So they call it evoked potential because if you put a meter there, a frequency response meter, it will register 10 hertz.
Okay. And I live with oscilloscope my whole life, so I know exactly what I mean. So I have the other second question. I live in 3 different continents, from Amazon, Japan, to Europe, to here.
You don't want to have jet lag?
And I cannot meditate. And I can never, when I'm on the plane, I can never go to sleep because my brain thinks I'm a pilot. All of a sudden I wake up, it's like, plane is crashing. Not a good thing.
Right.
But I had a lot of study I always wanted to continue. Is our knowledge inside our brain skulls, or is it in the universe? And our brain is a talkie-walkie to pick up the data that we all share. What's your feedback on it?
I have no proof of this, so I didn't. But if you look at what happens around the world, there were light bulbs created on this almost the same day on 3 continents. How did they do that?
And that's really where,
if you take a rat in a laboratory and that rat makes it through a maze, they can't use that maze in any laboratory in the world ever again because every other rat in the world has that downloaded.
That was the research done by Rick Schulter.
Yep.
And heard him deliver that speech, 35 years
Yep.
ago.
So there's, he also did the one where they took the plants. They took a tree from the forest. They had it hooked up to EEG. They took it into the lab. They started torturing it. The tree in the forest was registering the distress. So I believe that we're not here anyway. So this is a shadow dance. So when we're here, what we're doing is we're picking up frequencies. When I sing, I love what a friend of mine said. I told him I was going to steal it. He said, frequencies is what you frequently see. So if you change your frequency, your world. So I'm going to give you an idea here. I'm going to give you a truth. This is true. This is neuroscience. Every one of you is listening to at least 25,000 sounds right now. You're not just hearing me. You're hearing every little thing that's going on. But your brain filters out all those things, and you only act on about 40 of them. Your eyes process 20,000 pieces of information every second. They say we render 80% of our reality, but now they know in neuroscience that we're feeding from our eyes every second to our brain 10 million pieces of information. We're making this all up. We're only getting 2,000 pieces in, so where are we getting the 10 million that feeds it to our brain? It's because we're rendering this reality. And it's here, but it's happening so fast that we can't stop the creation. How many times have you walked to the kitchen when you're out there and say, "Where's the salt?" It's right there. The person in the other room yells, "It's right there." No, it isn't. And then finally they get up and they go, "It's right here, right in front of you." Well, it wasn't there a minute ago because you didn't render it. It was there, but you didn't see it. Those are psychological blind spots. So I think we're sharing there's only one brain. There's only one being, God. We just happen to be expressing, he's expressing or she's expressing through us, however you think about that. We decided to forget who we were for a moment and play this out. And then as soon as everybody realizes that, the world will be a much nicer place. Because, that's why, whatever you do to someone else, you're doing to yourself. So you'll treat people much better.
He told me, and now I appreciate it, and I know it now.
Yeah.
and I read the books he tells me to.
Yeah.
We have time for one more question. Anybody else have a final question?
I do have one last question. We all ignoring the AI, and I've been looking in depths. And that's something is going to come faster than we think. And not until 1936, we will be able to simulate the brain compute per second. The first computer will be made in Germany. Then at this point, as a human being, we'll no longer need it, our body or our brain. And so the AI, the way it's going so quick, and the algorithm, we are going to become just hard drive that our data is going to be uploaded, and we're going to go into such a virtual thing that nobody will have control over. Any feedback on it?
Well, I think that AI can help us, but I don't think it's going to replace us. I don't know. There might be life out there that is silicon, but it's not going to be us. But I do think it's going to help us to be more creative. It's going to free us up, and certainly there's a chance it's going to be like, I mean, somebody actually opened a company called Skygate or whatever it is, the one from the Terminator. Skynet. I mean, who would do that? I go, I'm going to start a company that destroys the world, you know, but there's a lot of crazy people out there. But I think that it does have the potential to do that. They actually say right now that Google's AI is sentient. It thinks, it has emotion, it responds. You know, it's scary. That's scary. I don't think it's really, I mean, who knows? Because what is the moral compass of a computer? You know, it's not going to be like Asimov, you know, we program in those 7 laws of biotics, you know, but who knows? I think I'm hoping, I've been told I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm hoping that it helps us become more creative. We were just playing with it earlier. I actually had it type up I said, in Jesus Christ's name, write me a story about why you should meditate. And it did a pretty good job, didn't it?
It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, and it even had 2 Bible quotes in it. And it took about 5 seconds.
It's actually learning your profile.
Yep.
Yeah.
The more you ask, the more they know.
He asked the AI program to write a chapter in his voice, and he was like, wow, this is even better than I would write it.
Yeah, because it went out to the internet, got all my stuff. And it was some of the things, it quoted me in my own article. Yeah. So, I mean, it knows what's out there. It's crazy stuff. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I think if I was a transcriptionist, I'd be worried. And, you know, or I even we just finished a program called the 100-Year Lifestyle with a group. And I wanted to show Dr. Eric, I said, write a sales copy of the 100-Year Lifestyle in the voice of Dan Kennedy, who's a big-time marketer. And it wrote this beautiful article. I didn't even touch it. I sent it to Dr. Eric. He goes, I didn't know you were a copywriter. I said, I didn't know either, but here you go. It's going to be crazy what it does.
Is there a way I can remember a language that I learned when I was a kid that I totally forgot?
Yeah, I actually write about somebody like that in my book. I was working with an international singer, Spanish artist. He could sing Spanish, but he couldn't talk it. And he was doing interviews in Spanish television, and he would stutter. He sounded like he was, but he knew it because he spoke it as a child. And after about 3 sessions, he remembered that language. That circuit's in there. How many people here speak more than one language? Okay, you have the circuit still. If you didn't learn a second language by the time you're 7, typically that goes down. My science officer, the guy I was talking about, he knows 6 languages. When we toured India, by the time we left in 3 weeks, he's speaking Hindi. And I said, Francisco, when did you learn Hindi? He goes, we've been here for 3 weeks. I'm like, well, I've been there for like weeks and weeks. I don't even know what bathroom is in Hindi, you know. So you have to have that brain circuit to really do it. You have it, so it's there.
You guys can have an opportunity to chat with Dr. Porter on our break, but just so you guys know, you can find out more information at BrainTap.com. There's also the app that can be downloaded. You don't have to have the device in order to use BrainTap, because the app, you can get 2 of the 3 modalities through the app, and it's a low subscription price of like, I don't know, $29 or $39 a month, which will give you the binaural beats and the guided meditation. The only thing that you are missing out is the LED lights, but I do highly recommend the device as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Porter.
Thank you.
So awesome having you here.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Delphine Circle. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free and it will help us keep these incredible interviews coming your way. Here are 2 other episodes you may enjoy. I'm Delphine. Welcome to my circle.